Cross-platform mobile development refers to the practice of creating mobile applications that can run on multiple platforms, for example, iOS and Android, using a single code base. That's in direct contrast to traditional native mobile development, which requires developing a separate code base for each supported platform. The traditional or native approach requires expertise in a different programming language and environment per platform. For example, iOS development is natively done with Swift or Objective-C using Apple's Xcode development environment, whereas native Android development is typically done using Google's development tools, Android Studio and Android SDK, and natively uses Java or Kotlin as a development language. There are many cross-platform frameworks, but there are three that we primarily see in the enterprise. The first is React Native. It was developed by Facebook, and it allows developers to use React, a JavaScript library, to build mobile apps that can look and feel native on both iOS and Android platforms. The next is Flutter, created by Google. Flutter is an open source toolkit for building natively compiled applications for mobile, but also for web and desktop from a single code base. And it uses Dart as the programming language. The last of the three is Xamarin, or its evolved state, which is MAUI, and it was created by Microsoft. It allows developers to build iOS and Android apps from a single code base using C# and the .NET framework. There are advantages and disadvantages to using cross-platform frameworks. The biggest advantage is often reduced development time, which ultimately reduces costs and eases maintenance, since developers only really need to manage a single code base. On the other hand, using a cross-platform approach can have limitations when you're accessing certain platform-specific features or when trying to match the performance of a native app for each platform. So what criteria should I consider when choosing to use a cross-platform solution? There are several that we think about. The first is development time and cost. Cross-platform solutions allow for faster development since you're writing the code once, and you can deploy it then to multiple platforms. This can result in cost savings compared to developing separate native apps for iOS and Android. Another criteria we think about is maintenance. Cross-platform solutions can simplify maintenance since, again, you only need to manage one code base. However, there can be cases where you need to wait for updates from the framework provider to incorporate new features or bug fixes. Another criteria to think about is user experience. Native apps tend to offer better performance and a smoother user experience because they're optimized specifically for their respective platforms. So consider whether your app requires complex animations, gestures, or platform-specific functionality that might be challenging to implement in a cross-platform framework. Which leads directly to the next criteria, access to native features. Evaluate whether your app requires access to specific device features, things like GPS, camera, accelerometer, or maybe push notifications. While many cross-platform frameworks provide plugins or APIs to these native features, there may be limitations compared to native development. So evaluate what your app requires and choose an approach that can meet those requirements. The last criteria to think about is performance. Native apps typically offer better performance compared to cross-platform apps, especially for things like graphic-intensive apps or games. So you'll need to consider the performance requirements of your app and whether any potential performance trade-offs are acceptable. To ask questions about cross-platform mobile development or any other development topic, reach out to ask the team at keyholesoftware.com.